Okay, welcome Torea to the Biohacker Babes.
I am so excited to be here, and this is amazing. Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you for joining
Mm.
us. I
Yeah.
sometimes we extend like the honorary babe title when we have like a female like aligned trio, and I feel like we are all very aligned. So you're
Thank
a
you.
babe for today.
Definitely.
You're always a babe, but
Yay.
you're a BB
So good.
specifically today.
Love it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so we met through mycology psychology. I actually hired you to do some microdosing integration work because when I came onto the mycology into the mycology network,
Yes.
I wanted to experience how people were using microdosing, but through the functional lens. And so we have similar backgrounds through FDN and
That's
now
correct.
the microdosing experience, but you're also experienced in NLP and psychoneuroimmunology.
Yep.
Blah, blah, blah.
Love that word, but yes.
So
Yeah.
many letters.
I know, right?
Yeah, so really excited to talk about not just psychedelics, but behavioral change and like real, true, lasting change for people. There's so many people that are suffering and they're looking for real solutions. And,
Yeah.
psychedelics is kind of the big tantalizing candy
Yeah,
solution.
it's the headline thing right now, for sure.
It's the
Yeah.
headline. Yeah.
Yeah.
But as we were speaking about before we hit record, a lot of people are missing the basics and we
Hmm.
can't pay for the basics, can't pay for sunshine. And there's a lot of missed opportunities there. So I
Totally.
am excited to just kind of drop into your psyche today and hear your current opinions, thoughts, fascinations with what we're missing in that regard, if we are
Yeah.
trying to embark on a psychedelic journey.
Yeah, thank you. I think, just thinking about my practice over the last decade and the kinds of clients that I've been working with chronic illness through FDN and everything else, there was a big focus early on for me that was just on the biological body and the biochemistry and doing the labs and trying to do the gut protocols and the hormone protocols and really addressing it from there. But it was those clients who got like 80% of the way, but then kind of plateaued that I was really curious about because it was like, do we do another protocol? Like, what's missing here? Did I miss something? And what I started to recognize was missing was the mental aspect, right? Of what's going on in the mind and our mindset. So I got very focused on mindset work and that kind of thing. But then I discovered psychoneuroimmunology, which is my favorite word. And if you like spell it out, it's so long on the page. I love it. Um,
Yeah.
but psychoneuroimmunology is a branch of science that's really looking at what is going on in the mind and how is that having a downward cascade in terms of neurotransmitters, cytokines, hormones, et cetera. And how is that having an effect on how the cells and organs are operating, how our immune system is operating? And that is really where I got super fascinated because we know now stress and stressful thoughts and all of those things that we can ruminate on over and over actually downregulates the genes in our immune system. So, working with chronic illness patients, when we start to look at what's going on in the mind, we start to begin to have a relationship to our illness. Or even if it's been going on for a long time, it can actually seed into the identity. Like somebody can say, "Hi, I have MS," or "Hi, I have Lyme disease. Therefore, that means I can't do blah 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 blah." Right? So then if we start looking at it from the identity perspective, how much of that mind thought pattern is actually keeping their immune system down regulated because they're constantly thinking, "Oh, I can't. Oh, I'm broken. I'm there's something wrong with me forever." And so I started really working with clients in this space of how can we start to shift this so that we can start to really boost that immune system so that they can start to become more resilient and start to shift themselves. And there's been another study done where they showed that people who are practicing gratitude for 10 minutes a day, just like really feeling grateful for something in the moment, their secretory IgA levels went up fourfold. Fourfold. We don't
So
have a
cool.
drug
Wow.
that does that. right? There's no drug that will bring up secretory IgA fourfold. And so when I read that, I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. So I started working with gratitude practice with my clients, myself, and lo and behold, we start seeing secretory IgA coming up, which is amazing. So it's those kinds of things that really got me fascinated on what's going on in the mind and how that's having an effect on our biology and our body and our health and our wellness. And that got me straight into neuroscience and got me into quantum biology and all those other things I've been obsessing about ever since.
Wow. So cool. Oh my gosh.
Right?
Yeah.
Torea goes down the hole deep. We were
I
talking
do.
about this the other day. She's like, gets curious about something and it will be fully
Down the rabbit hole.
explored.
Oh yeah.
You have a serious question.
Yeah.
She's your girl.
If you need me
Okay.
to go do your PubMed research, just give me a question. And I am so happy just going in there, reading all of the research articles and papers and all of it. So yeah.
Okay.
Please send us
That's
some
a
of the
good skill.
gratitude research, because we did a presentation and added this piece and we were like, oh God, there's not a ton of research that we were finding, but like, it's just so clear to us that this plays such a pivotal role, but that very direct connection with the immune system is insane.
Yeah. I mean, it's
amazing.
We're starting to really understand now that the mind will have this like chemical cascade, right? And then we feel an emotion. And this is my own theory. I've not read anything, but my own theory is like, oh, I wonder if the emotion, like what I'm feeling in the body when I'm feeling gratitude, like, is that just a representation of like the chemical messengers in the heart area? I'm not sure. That's my own thing. But what happens is we have this emotion and this feeling from that chemical messenger standpoint. And the brain, of course, is always monitoring the body, right? And so it notices, oh, there's this feeling going on in the body. And so it has this continuous loop where it's like, oh, you're feeling that emotion. Let me give you some more thoughts so that we can continue this chemical messenger scenario that's going on. So we have this thought, we have a feeling, the feeling produces more thoughts that produces more of the same feeling. And now you can see how people get into ruts of depression and anxiety, right?
Yeah, like a feedback loop.
It's a huge feedback loop. So if we're not breaking that connection down, or if we're not actually putting some kind of interrupt into that thought process, then that can become something that can be programmed into the subconscious mind, or some people are talking about it from a default mode network standpoint in the brain. Like that is how we pattern stuff in. And so that's where I've gotten super focused with my clients in terms of what is being patterned and getting them to be consciously aware of what those thoughts actually are. Because half the time we're walking around the planet and that noise is going on and we're not really paying attention. But guess what? The body is paying attention.
Always listening.
Always listening.
Yeah.
Always.
So for an example, I'm thinking of someone I know who has really bad depression. Their health isn't doing well, but when they're not doing well health-wise, they get a lot of love and compassion from those around them. So maybe that reinforces the unhealthy side of things. And then they try and do a gratitude journal and that lasts for 2 days and then they're depressed. So they stop doing it. And what is the disruptor? You said like you have to find something to disrupt that cycle. Is that mushrooms? Is that
could be? Could be for sure. I mean, pattern interrupts are a really great way to disrupt the cycle. And there's a number of different ways that we can do pattern interrupts. What's really interesting about that example that you gave, Renee, is they have secondary gain going on. They are getting attention. And I used to be this way too. When I had chronic illness, it was the time where people would take care of me is when I was chronically ill. And so in a way, it's like, oh, I'm getting love and attention from people. And it's not like we're intentionally setting out for that to be, but that is something that's happening. So they're getting rewarded in that way. So, being aware of what that secondary gain is takes some courage to look at, because it can be embarrassing that we've been doing that. I don't think that anybody is intentionally going out for secondary gain, but once we're aware of it, the coolest thing about awareness is that it's a pivot point. The days are numbered once we become aware of it. And so then we can start to notice, like, okay, that's how I start coaching my clients in terms of how else can you get this love and attention from the people around you that isn't in the area of you being ill. And that's an interesting question. Like, what is that dynamic there, and how can we love ourselves in a way that we can get that love and attention? That's also very important, is this whole self-love, self-compassion piece of it. But then also, how can we shift that around? But pattern interrupts can be very simple. The one thing that I love the most is using language, because language is super impactful on our neurology, but we don't really talk about it enough. Like, not a lot of people really talk about it. So if we're looking at our language, sometimes we can use language as a pattern interrupt with ourselves of, recognizing a dynamic with, say, a partner. And what was the example that I gave to a client the other day? It was a partner would get into an argument around the dishes, which seems really trite, but this is how this stuff works, right? So they get into an argument around the dishes because every time they would ask their partner about unloading the dishwasher, the partner would respond in a very snippy or defensive way. And then that would trigger the client to be frustrated and sad about it. Right. So can we use language to interrupt that conversation? So the suggestion that we came up with was, instead of asking your partner, hey, have you unloaded the dishwasher? Ask them, hey, did you take the coyote out of the dishwasher? And they're like, what? And it's totally nonsensical and random. And it's done that for a purpose, because the partner had to do a double take of what they were saying. But that was the first time they didn't get met with snippy and, upset, right? So it's then the client could then feel something different and interrupt that pattern. So we can use language in that way to really do an interrupt. We can also do just unexpected, sudden actions. A simple hand on a shoulder can be enough to interrupt. Using touch can interrupt the way that those patterns are happening. So the more that we interrupt that, we're kind of putting scratches in the record, right? And then we'll get more and more skips in the record, and we can't play it anymore. So
great.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, great analogy. And that's okay. The coyote out of the dishwasher.
Random.
It's kind of like a safe word, plus a little humor. And yes, pattern interruption. I think, that's so essential. But creating that transition where we step away from seeking love outside of ourselves, self-compassion feels like the elephant in the room. So I love that pattern interrupt, but it feels really essential to have some other players in the space, having that community, loved ones. So really stating our needs. How do you address that? Bringing community support or family or friends into it, and knowing that we probably can't and really shouldn't do this alone.
That's a really Pandora's box kind of question there, Lauren.
All this
I think, right. It's also interconnected, that we could go a million different directions. But, I think for a long time, I worked primarily with women with chronic illness, and there were definitely some themes, right? Women have been routinely minimized and told to be quiet and polite and all of those things. And so it's not uncommon for a woman to not be able to speak her truth and, feel like it's unsafe to do so. And so in those cases is when we start practicing just writing things down, right? Doesn't mean that you have to speak it out loud, but at least starting to have that conversation with somebody is really helpful, whether that be a coach or a therapist or whatever. That can really help start to break that pattern of keeping quiet and keeping it inside. And the more that they can start to write things out and be more comfortable with the words that they're using, then eventually what that will translate to is being comfortable expressing themselves to other people. and then to a partner, for example. And then we can start working on voicing one's needs. But if they don't know what their own needs are because they've suppressed that for so long, that's where we kind of need to start, is like identifying what those are and then internalizing them and putting them on the page and transmuting them out of the body and the mind and onto a piece of paper and then out to other people. So that's how I would address that kind of piece. But what I've noticed from a self-compassion piece, this is like one of the gems of all gems of transformation and healing, is when we can start to be compassionate towards ourselves. Because I was talking about those stressful thoughts before and how they're like down-regulating the genes of the immune system. Those stressful thoughts include the self-deprecating thoughts, which how many of us have been like in an inner monologue going, oh God, you jerk. Like, why did you do that? Right. And that is the piece, like becoming aware of what those self-deprecating thoughts are, and then starting to question them, to put some doubt in there. Because the moment we put doubt in it, then it's like, oh, I don't know. Is that really true? I don't know if I need to continue this entire thought spiral into I'm such a piece of shit, I don't deserve to be on the planet.
Yeah. And thoughts become proteins. That's so powerful. I don't remember how or why I started doing this, but what Renee and I have talked about it. I used to be that inner critic very aggressively and harshly. And so I used an interrupt of laughter. Like if I tripped or dropped something, or, sometimes I dropped the soap in the shower, like I just laugh at myself, where I used to be like, damn, like who knows what kind of words and sounds would come out. And now I laugh. And it's just so easy to get right back into the flow, where the negativity can just so quickly take a right turn and there's no coming back at all. Yeah.
I love that you're using laughter, because another like category of like pattern interrupts is the way that we use our voice, or the way that we have facial expressions, or our physical body posture has a big impact on our biochemistry. And if we can shift our biochemistry just through our body posture, like that can be that pattern interrupt. So if you're finding yourself in that, like getting self-critical because you dropped the soap in the shower, then, immediately standing in a superwoman pose is going to completely interrupt that, because now you're interjecting the feeling and biochemistry of confidence. And that doesn't align with, wow, you're a piece of jerk. You're a jerk because you dropped the soap in the shower. Whatever you were jerk saying. That. Yeah. You get the idea. Like we can use our physical body as a pattern interrupt. And so sometimes when I'm working with clients and habits around breaking these cycles of thought patterns, it's like when you become aware that it's happening, I don't care, get up from what you're doing and go for a walk outside. Like that is going to be enough of a pattern interrupt for you to stop that pattern in its tracks, and it'll become less and less efficient in the brain. And then the brain is going to start to go towards the other stuff that we're practicing, which is installing the new habits and new thoughts.
Yeah. I love what you said about the body language and confidence. One of my first jobs out of college, I was terrified. I was one of the youngest people. I didn't really feel like I deserved to be there. I went shopping. I bought all these new dresses, new heels. I showed up and I loved how I looked. And man, I stood taller. I crushed it. I felt good. Total game changer just by dressing in a way that made me feel more confident.
Yeah.
And that's just one new costume. Sure. Yeah.
It's amazing those things that we can do. And, I was fortunate to watch Amy Cuddy speak on stage. I'm not sure if you're familiar with who Amy Cuddy is.
The name sounds familiar.
She has a famous TED Talk about this specifically around confidence and body posture and confidence, and how, the body postures of us, like if you imagine, right, with a device, we're like hunched over and, typing. But when we are feeling depressed and down on ourselves, our shoulders are rounded, right? Our head is down a little bit. And so, but when we are feeling confident, our chin is up a little bit, our shoulders are back, right? So just those very simple movements, you can feel it in the body. Like if you hunch over, it's like, ooh, I don't know. But if you're like standing up straight, it feels great. So it's finding those little nuances so that people can recognize and be aware of how much of our biochemistry are we actually shifting through just even the way that our posture is or our movement is. And that can be enough of an interrupt because, of course, we're all on devices all day long, right? So, but if we're hunched over all the time and we're getting like that massive dopamine hit from scrolling through social media, it's no wonder that our neurotransmitters are like wonky, right?
Yeah.
And wackadoodle. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And movement's a great one too. Like if I have a day where, I don't know, I get a couple annoying emails in a row or something and my head just, it starts going that direction, I will just go outside and walk around my neighborhood 1 lap in the sun. And then it's like a
1000%.
restart. It's a
Totally.
restart. Otherwise I would have to go to bed and sleep and start the next day. But
Right.
that can just break it up. Yeah.
It can be an instant restart
Instant.
for sure. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think sunshine is probably the number one interrupt and beneficial so far beyond that. And I think the narrative is finally kind of shifting around sunshine not being bad. If anything, it is hugely beneficial. But that is a great trick. Just
Yeah.
step outside.
Sunshine it's one of those quantum biology things that is I've known it for a while that sunshine feels amazing and it's beneficial for the body. But I didn't realize from a scientific standpoint, like how much of an effect it has on our hormone balance and our sleep and our energy and our vitamin D production in the skin and our immune system. And like, I could go on and on and on about sunshine. And it is the one thing that I think if anybody's looking for like a major hack, sunshine is it, because it like checks off 6 or 7 different boxes. I don't even know how many it is, but it checks off a lot of boxes. And I'm always looking for where can I double dip, right? Where can I do one thing that's going to have an effect on multiple things? Sunshine is it. And morning sunshine is really huge.
Yeah.
The
Definitely.
most important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's free.
And it's totally free.
I know,
Totally free.
You can't pay for sunshine. We're not going to make money off of this recommendation, everyone. Okay. There's no disclaimer, no
Nope,
kickback
not at all.
from
And
sunshine.
it's interesting because, you know, I talk about it a lot. I talk about it on social media. I talk about it with my clients, like, and people are like, why is she going in the sun in the morning all the time? Like, that's all she posts about. But it's like, I keep saying it over and over because we live in a consumer, is it capitalism? I don't even know what kind of society we're in.
I would say. Yeah.
Whatever. We're driven by money, right? So we
Yeah.
value things that we pay money for. We don't pay money for sunshine. It just rises and it's there. So we kind of ignore it as a thing. And we've become so disconnected from nature as a society in the Western world that we're not actually spending time being in the presence of the different wavelengths and the photons that are coming from the sun that have such a huge impact on how our overall physical body operates. And I think that is one of those things that's incredibly overlooked. And people are very aware in the winter of like, oh yeah, I get really depressed in the winter. It's like, well, yeah, because you spend your summer indoors, right? And we spend our winters indoors and we're behind glass that is filtering out the harmful UV rays, which is great because I don't want to get sunburned sitting next to the window every day. But at the same time, we need that full spectrum of wavelength of the sun to be able to kick off all of these different processes within the body so that we can have a whole, well, vibrant, energetic, restful body. And I think it's one of the things that is just totally underrated and people don't talk about it enough. So I talk about it every day.
Yeah. Welcome to the
Keep
broken
doing
record team. We got to keep resetting.
That's right.
Well, this is timely because we're heading towards winter. The days are shorter and we're about to go through another time change. So this will be coming out a little after, but we're like, for most people, we're entering that sad phase.
Yep.
So what are your recommendations? And the end goal here is to talk about psychedelics, but we have to cover like these basic things where some people,
No, we totally do.
like the people skip over the basics. So when sunshine kind of goes away, if you're especially above the 37th parallel, people are waking up in the dark, give us your best solutions.
Yeah. So this is a creative time of year, meaning you might need to get creative with your schedule. You might have to get up, do some of your other things, shower, eat breakfast, etc. But then when the sun is coming up, take advantage, go outside, have your cup of coffee, right? So change up your morning routine as much as you can to try and get that. If that is not something that you can do, then you can there are a couple different lamps that have been created now that try and have as full spectrum as possible of mimicking sunlight as much as they can. I have one right in front of me that I have on because it's nice. It fills up for, a video call, but I use that a lot in the winter to just supplement and help keep my sleep schedule pretty much the same, because now that I am so tuned in to the sun and everything else, like the sun goes down at 6 and I'm like, okay, it's time to go to bed. And I'm like, this is crazy. I'm like going to bed at 7:00 at night. Like, this is kind of nuts. So I'm trying to use it to help regulate that piece of it too. But, if you have to get a hold of one of these light bulbs or lamps that does provide as much of that full spectrum. But honestly, like if you can just shift your schedule around to get that morning sunrise time, 20 minutes maximum, like you don't need a lot. Or if you are living in Alaska, for example, my best friend, she lives in Alaska, and in the wintertime, sun comes up at 10 and goes down at 2. So it's an extreme kind of thing. So they in Alaska will make a point, like every day at noon, they are out cross-country skiing, snowshoeing, whatever they have to do to be outside at high noon to get as much of that sunlight in as possible. And almost everybody I know up in Alaska also supplements with a lamp because of it. But I mean, depending upon how far north you live and how susceptible you are, you might want to invest in a lamp. Otherwise, get creative, shift around your routine so that you can get out and get that time, because of course I rabbit holed this too. So University of Washington released a study last year where they were studying the visual circuit in the brain that was perceiving the sunlight, and they were trying to figure out like how it was affecting the circadian rhythm. And long story short, they discovered that it's not just particular wavelengths. It is actually the change of the gradient over time that is triggering the circadian rhythms in the body. So it's like all the lamps that we have that are the best of the best are still not even coming close. We're getting there, but it's not even close. So if you can get out during that time of change as the sun comes up and gets brighter, that is the biggest trigger for circadian rhythms because of the gradient change.
Right. I have heard that. So yeah, the sunrise and the sunset, that change. Oh, yeah. That's hard.
It is hard.
I can do sunset.
And for some people, it's hard to get up in the morning around the sun. And so, but here's what we know with circadian rhythm entrainment is that the more you do it, the easier it will be to get up earlier and earlier, which is kind of a cool trick if you think about it, because if you're changing time zones, if you are starting to do that work ahead of time, before you get on a jet to go across time zones, it's actually going to be easier for you. So you can use it to your advantage.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, I do a decent amount of travel from West Coast to East Coast since I live on the West Coast, all my family's on the East Coast. And the times that I really like prepare for the time change, I feel so much better when I get there.
Oh yeah. Hands down.
Yeah, makes such a difference. Just trying to go to bed a little bit earlier, wake up a little bit earlier.
Yeah. Just a little prep work.
Yeah.
We're all capable.
We are. We are.
Yeah.
It just takes a
Yeah.
little bit of practice. And I mean, what's kind of cool about it is that the earlier you get that exposure, right, that kind of kicks off a 12-hour clock, if you will. It's not exact, but it's about 12 hours. That's when the body starts to produce melatonin. So this is why sunrise light is so important, because it's also influencing our melatonin production. And that's the timer for the melatonin production. So the earlier you get up and have that sunrise exposure, guess what? The earlier your melatonin production will kick in, which helps you fall asleep earlier. So those people who are like, oh my gosh, it's so hard to shift, I always start them with the morning shift as opposed to saying, oh, just go to bed earlier, because that doesn't work.
Yeah.
No,
No.
not when
Such
your
a
mind is
missing
running.
piece.
Not at
No,
all.
we got to
Yeah.
start preparing for sleep when we wake up.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. So the both of us do a lot of screening calls for microdosing.
Yes, we
And
do.
what I've found a lot of the times, we have this really amazing solution, said microdosing, but the behaviors and the lifestyle and the nutrition pieces are really not in place. And so there's so much work to be done ahead of time. I mean, this leads into what we were just talking about in terms of sunshine, but what are the other like really big pieces or maybe low hanging fruit that you think are not talked about often enough in the psychedelic space?
Again, with the Pandora's box questions, this is awesome. We could be here all day talking about this, but I think, if we're not covering the basics from a health perspective, it's going to be really hard to get the brain on board. So thinking about it from what are the types of things that we are taking in from a nutrition standpoint that help support the brain? Well, shocker, a whole foods based diet that has plenty of polyphenols in it and lots of different colors and lots of fiber, right? That is the kind of stuff that supports the brain the most. So if we're not eating in that way, or if we're taking in too much sugar and our body is unable to shift into ketosis and be able to go back and forth between burning carbs and burning fat, then the brain's not going to be able to function very well. So, from a diet standpoint, that is something that's often overlooked. And of course, we're in this system now with psychiatrists and psychologists have their lane and nutritionists have their lane. And God forbid you cross over between the two, right? So people aren't making these recommendations, yet we have like crossed over a lot of the stuff in our profession. So now it's like, oh, but we have to talk about the diet piece. So I think really focusing in on how people are fueling themselves is a really important conversation. And then more importantly, not more, but just as importantly, electrolytes and hydration. Because every single nerve cell, when we are firing across the synapse, we are using sodium, potassium, and calcium. That is how our synapses work. And if we don't have enough of that in the body and enough of that mineral content in the body, of course, our brain isn't going to function well. Of course, we're going to have brain fog. Of course, it's going to, go down the most efficient pathway because it can't fire any more synapses. So if we're not really looking at those basics from the hydration standpoint and a food standpoint, we're really missing the mark. And then if you want to take it a little bit layer deeper, we got to look at gut microbiome, because the gut microbiome, there's a whole portion of the gut microbiome that is now called the psychobiome, right? Which is which of these microbes are actually helping us generate the neurotransmitters. Like most of the serotonin we create it in the gut through our microbiome. So if that's not in a really good state, then of course there's going to be issues with anxiety and depression and everything else. So we kind of have to look at both in a true psychoneuroimmunology standpoint, like what is going on in the mind and how is that a result of what's been happening in the body, which for a lot of people on a standard American diet, not getting out and moving that much, not getting any sunlight, and not drinking enough water, let alone water with electrolytes in it, they're depleted. Of course, their brain's depleted. It's just a reflection on what's going on in the body.
Yeah. And then how well will psychedelics work if we're not doing that? It's like, I need mushrooms. No, you need water.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is interesting, and I'm not sure if you've noticed this, Lauren, maybe this has come up for you, but a lot of my clients who start microdosing, the first couple days, they're like, is it normal to be this thirsty?
Yep.
And then I start to ask them like, okay, well, let's look at your hydration status. And are you using electrolytes? And lo and behold, they're drinking like maybe 2 cups of water a day, no electrolytes, and they're getting the rest of their fluids through food or coffee. And no, yes, that's normal. Okay, let's fix the hydration status. And then that goes away. And then they can start to get the benefit of the microdosing. Does that happen for you too? Are you finding a lot of clients come to you?
Oh yeah. It like turns on these instinctual drives to do the things that we should be doing. But what do you think, like from a neurology standpoint, is actually happening?
Great question.
Other than I really feel like it just gets you into a more instinctual place where you're like, oh, that makes sense.
I think what's really interesting about the way that the psychedelics are working, or at least the serotonergic ones, is that they're allowing other networks in the brain to start communicating more effectively. And so because of that, I think that we can become more aware of our physical body state. So the other common complaint, if you will, starting microdosing that I get is, wow, I'm really tired. Right. And then we start digging into like, okay, well, when do you rest? Oh, but I don't. Right. It's like, I've got 2 kids and I've got a job and, I don't really have time to rest. And like, well, that's kind of a problem. We need to be able to rest. Right. So I think because these extra networks are able to communicate a little bit better, we now can listen to our body a little bit more, because I think those signals become exaggerated in a way, because we've gotten so busy and used to like ignoring all of those. How many times have we ignored the fact that we're hungry, have to pee, and we're tired, right? Like we ignore that a lot. And so we get that patterned in as a way of ignoring what's going on in the body. And I think when people are starting the microdosing and they're starting to get those signals again, they're starting to get that communication from the body. And from there, we can start to really pay attention to what needs to be addressed first. And I think usually what shows up is what's most critical, to be quite honest.
Yeah,
I agree.
That's
powerful. Okay.
Especially the fatigue part. I always think that's so valuable. I feel tired. Great. Let's lean into that. Let's listen to that. Let's actually finally rest. I had a higher dose journey where the entire lesson from that journey was you need to sleep for all of the years of sleep deficits. Like just lay here on this mat for 5 hours and rest.
Wow.
Yeah. I was like,
wow.
Noted.
Yeah.
I heard it.
Interesting. Yeah. I had a journey once where I not major, I think like 1.8. And I just wanted to sleep. And I told my husband that I was like, I just want to sleep right now. He's like, you can't sleep right now. You have to hang out with me. And I'm like, my body wants to sleep. I don't know what. So that's interesting.
Valuable.
I didn't really listen to that clearly.
Yeah.
I heard it, but I didn't listen to it. So
Interesting. It's interesting because, a lot of times in the biohacking world, right, we get these devices that are giving us feedback. The Oura Ring is giving us feedback. I'm experimenting right now with a Lumen device and it's giving me feedback. And the last couple of days with the Lumen device, it's been giving me feedback and telling me, hey, you should really do this. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know about that. I think I'm going to wait. Right. And it's been really interesting to observe myself of like, ooh, I don't know if I want to do that. And maybe I should continue doing what I'm doing, which obviously is the stuff that doesn't work. Right. So it's like interesting that we do that with our own biology, that we ignore our own biology. And then when we start using plant medicine in this way, all of a sudden we can get attuned to a lot of these bodily feedback signals, right? It's the same kind of biofeedback, but it's not a device. Now it's like the actual body is trying to talk to us. And I do think sometimes that the most poignant stuff is the stuff that comes into our awareness first. Like this is the linchpin that we need to work on so that we can clear that out so that we can focus on some other things. And There is that mystical quality to the psychedelics. And I often wonder, like, is it allowing our subconscious to come through a little bit more? And I think that is the case.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So if these psychedelics are letting our subconscious speak, saying we're tired, we're anxious, we're depressed, we're thirsty, we're hungry, how do you
We're selling it.
huh?
We're really selling it.
Oh,
Right. It's like, oh, guess what?
Yeah.
It's not unicorns and rainbows. It's 3 days of crying. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. But I think people need to understand that this is kind of the experience, right?
But
Yes.
but
Yeah.
this is why you need to work with a coach, like one of you, right? I mean, I think
1000%.
most people would come up and they would maybe get frustrated or just annoyed
This
and not
isn't
want to
working.
continue.
I'm
Yeah.
putting it on the shelf. Yeah. Yeah.
So just emphasizing the importance of having a coach, and then of course, integration, like what does that all mean and how do we incorporate that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would just say I've had a high percentage of people coming to me for discovery calls that have already tried it and it was not a good
Mhm.
experience. And I'm so
Mhm.
glad that they are open to a second experience, but
Yeah.
it's so critical. Like the differences are so vast between being intentional, having the support of a coach, getting the right source of medicine that's clean and also specific to your intention, which I think is like the coolest thing about mycology, because we could use a mushroom that spirals someone more into anxiety. And what good are we doing
Right.
there?
Right.
So it has to be so
Absolutely.
specific.
It does. And it's really, when I'm doing these discovery calls, I'm always asking them to describe, like, what are you experiencing right now? Like, where do you feel like you're stuck? And what is that state of being? I want to get a good understanding of, like, what is their physical body experiencing and what moods are they stuck in? And then I always ask the question of, what do you want to experience instead? And that answer of the other side is so important for me to guide them as to which blend to use, because the blends have these different qualities to them. And if we give them a blend that's only going to enhance the quality that they're already in, we run this risk of getting into that, like, it's not going to work for me, or it's not a good experience. And just knowing what I know about neuroplasticity, and that we're introducing the state of neuroplasticity with these kinds of natural medicines, we got to be really, really careful, because if we pattern in the same old stuff, we are pouring concrete on it and it's going to cement it in. And what we really want is, we want them to practice almost the polar opposite, so that they can pattern that in and have that move into the subconscious, or move into the default mode network autopilot type function of the brain. So it's really important to work with somebody to have that kind of consultation to understand, like, what blend and strains do I start working with? And then from there, when the uncomfortable stuff comes up, or the, like, I'm tired all the time and I'm too busy to be tired all the time, well, let's look at that. Right. And really the unfortunate answer is, it's not a magic pill. I know it's a magic pill, and and it's magic mushrooms, right? And we're talking about it in that way, but it's not a magic pill in the sense of, we still have to do the work to get through it. There is no, like, skirting around it and avoiding it. You actually have to get through it. And so sometimes that's through fatigue, and through thirst, and through sadness, and crying for 3 days, and getting through that point to reach the other side. I've been on the planet long enough to know that all of my best memories are all of those adventures that did not go to plan, right? The ones that went to plan, I don't remember those. I don't talk about those. Those aren't the ones that are like joyful memories. It is the ones where we went out into the backcountry and we got hit by a storm and we got a flat tire and we had to dig ourselves out, and we were soaked, cold, and shivering the whole time. But man, that was amazing, right?
Yes.
That's exactly what working with this kind of natural medicine is like sometimes we have to go through the muck and the rainstorm.
Oh, that's such a great point. for the longest time, I always felt like, oh, I'm a terrible storyteller. And when I'm in a social environment, I never have a story to offer. And so now I actually seek out things not being perfect because I actually have something to contribute and an interesting story. You're right. If things go perfectly, kind of boring.
Yeah, I mean, storytellers, if
Yeah,
you study storytelling at all, right? Script writing, whatever, there's this constant theme of the hero's journey. And the hero did not wake up one day and say, hey, I'm going to become a surgeon. And they became a surgeon. That's a boring story, right? They have to go through some kind of adversity, getting kicked out of university. Like something happened along their way for them to become the surgeon. And so, if we think about it from that storytelling point, I think the reason why that's so effective is that of the generations that we've handed down these stories, it's always those stories that are the ones that make the most impact. And I think that's because we get the most benefit from times where it doesn't go according to plan. So, yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Great point. Oh, yeah. Now I'm like thinking back to some crazy stories. Yes.
Right. Yeah.
You have a storybook. That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I should write more of them down, but hopefully they stay in my brain forever.
Well, we could talk about journaling. Go ahead, Renee.
Yeah. Well, I want to weave in quantum biology. I don't want to run out of time to talk about this because I'm so like curious. Like, to be honest, if someone said explain quantum biology or quantum physics, I would be like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I can't answer that.
Yeah.
And I feel like quantum, that word is thrown around a lot in the biohacking space. What does it really mean?
It is. Yeah. I mean, good question. Am I a quantum physicist? No. Do I have a very layman's understanding of it? Maybe. Right. Like it's what we know about Newtonian physics, right? Force and mass and speed and all of those things, that goes a very long way of describing what's happening in our actual world. And in biology, that went to a point, but then there were things that we were observing in biology, such as ATP generation in the mitochondria, that didn't quite add up. So for example, the constituents that go into generating the molecule of ATP or adenosine triphosphate, the energetic representation of the ingredients of that molecule don't add up to the energetic representation of the molecule once it's fully formed. So in Newtonian physics, that would be a like mathematical model. Well, the mathematical models don't work in that sense. And so more recently, scientists have been turning towards quantum physics models to map that onto biological function. And what they're discovering is that there's a lot of quantum physics that's happening within the biological body. And that is how a lot of this stuff can be explained. So, for example, the circadian rhythm and the sunlight that we were talking about, and how those photons have an effect in the body, what we're starting to understand is it's not just the wavelength that is having an effect, but it's the actual photons that are coming in that are having a major effect in the biological function. So quantum biology is that study of where does quantum physics interact with biological function. And so people are starting to pay attention more and more to these very small particles like photons from the light, or I think they're called sonons, but don't quote me on that one, sound particles that come through and sound vibration, or even negative ions that are produced with water that is collapsing on itself or in motion, right? So crashing waves or waterfalls creates a whole bunch of negative ions, and those negative ions in turn have a whole effect on our immune system and our nervous system and how it's behaving and that kind of thing. So now we can start to actually explain, why do you feel so great when you're at the ocean? Right?
Oh,
Everybody
great.
I know goes to the shore and listens to the waves crashing on the ocean, and they feel amazing, right? Why do we feel good when we put our bare feet on the ground? And so now we're starting to understand that this is coming from quantum biology in that way. So, but once again, what I found was really fascinating to me, because I'm a nature buff at heart. Like I prefer to be in wilderness than I do in civilization. But I'm that way because I feel better when I'm outside. I feel better when I'm in nature. I feel better when I'm touching trees and the ground with my bare hands and my feet. And now we know why. It's because of this quantum biology interaction that we have with not only our planet, but also the sunlight that's coming from the sun. And who knows, it's probably also stardust, but whatever is happening in that interaction, we're now starting to explain it through quantum biology. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a great
Yeah.
explanation.
Okay.
Yeah.
And yeah, go ahead.
I just following up. I mean, just being in nature. I was actually just in Yosemite a couple of weeks ago, and me not being a morning person, I was up at 6 a.m. doing like 8-hour hikes. I'm like, where is this energy coming from? And I truly believe it was coming from the nature.
Absolutely.
In the air, everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we know that plants give off something called phytoncides, and phytoncides actually interact with our immune system and our natural energy stores and that kind of thing. So that is where the concept of forest bathing has come from in Japan, is like getting ourselves exposed to these phytoncides that the plants are giving off. So I'm sure there's a whole bunch of this area that we don't even know about yet. So it's really fascinating to me to see these applications of quantum physics onto biological models, and we're starting to make sense of them. It's really cool.
Yeah, very cool.
So I know we all align in this, like we are naturally inclined to seek out nature because we know how good it feels, but we all work with people that can, you know, theoretically understand that connection, but don't feel it enough to have that pull. And so I'm so curious about the behavioral change or the pattern interrupts that help these people get to that point. And just as an example, like Renee and I found out that we both like naturally don't make a lot of BDNF. And so it's not hard for us to want to work out because we immediately feel amazing when we do. Easy. A lot of people don't have that same metabolic pathway. So I don't know, any tricks up your sleeve to get people to
I think
to feel the good things.
Yeah, I know, right? It's like people don't necessarily know what they don't know. And that's always a challenge, is like, if you haven't experienced it, then you're not really going to understand. And I think that's what has led me to creating the wilderness reset retreats that I host each year, is really setting up an environment so that people can actually be immersed in a natural setting in a safe way, where they're not having to sleep in a tent and they're not having to deal with bugs and spiders and all that stuff, but, you know, in a way where they are getting some time in sunrise, getting some time in forest, walking next to rushing rivers, for example, so that they can start to feel what that feels like. And then once they get a taste for what that feels like, then that turns into how can they start seeking that out in themselves. But it's, you know, it's tough, because even REI has a campaign going on right now called, I think it's called Outside in 5, meaning they're trying to make enough natural spaces available so that people can access a natural space like a park within 5 minutes of their home. And a lot of people in the United States don't have that luxury. And so, you know, it's like, how do we make getting outdoors easier? I think campaigns like that are really important because, you know, when we were not recording, we were talking about how we feel when we're in a city versus how we feel when we're in the outdoors, and that push and pull between, you know, being in what I call concrete jungles or coming into concrete. Like every time I go on a backcountry adventure and I'm surrounded by nature for a week or something, and then I come back home, inevitably, even though I live in small towns, inevitably I get this like existential, there's too much concrete, I can't deal with it, right? And so there's this like reestablishment that I need to get myself into when I'm in a more civilized version of society. Civilized in finger quotes, because of course, what does that mean, really? Right?
What does that mean? What are we seeking?
Yeah.
I don't want to be civilized.
But then again, like we were joking about the yurt in the Yukon, right? It's like, are we all going to be able to do that? There's too many humans on the planet. Like if we all disperse and spread out, then we're going to be having a huge impact on the natural environment. So I don't know what the right answer is, other than creating experiences for people or having them try something just even as simple as like going to the ocean. If they can actually access that space, then they can get a feel for it, but it doesn't have to be the ocean, right? So if we're talking about that like negative ion exposure, it could be a waterfall, it can be a rushing river, right? It doesn't have to be ocean necessarily.
Yeah. Thank goodness, because the ocean's quite far from here.
Right. And for a lot of people, that's true. I mean, there's people that haven't actually physically seen the ocean in real life. And so how do we get them access to the outdoors in a way that's beneficial for them? There's a lot of different environments, and we can get kind of the same effect if we start to substitute waterfall for ocean, for example.
Yeah. Quick side note about that. I was watching the Disney Imagineering documentary, and it was interesting when they were building the Tokyo Disneyland, how they built the elements into the park. They had the waterfalls, they had I think certain dirt and rocks, like they built the elements in, versus the Disney World and Disneyland in America. Americans didn't care about it, but in Tokyo, they knew for the park to succeed, they had to build the elements in and feng shui as well. Anyway, so
that's awesome.
Super
that's
cool.
A much more intentional way of building a theme park, I guess, in terms of making sure that people are getting these aspects to it. Japanese, they know what's up, man. They really do.
The biophilia, that's just second nature.
Cool.
So
well,
cool.
I know we have to start to wrap up. We're running out of time, but Torea, if you want to share a little bit more about your Bioneuro Blueprint, I believe is the title of what you have created. Can you share more about that?
Yeah. So I have a program that I run a couple cohorts each year that's based off of this Bioneuro Blueprint. And that is a process that I've developed over time of how do we instill change using the theories around psychoneuroimmunology, and how do we make that change be permanent? And so interlaced in the Bioneuro Blueprint are things like neural rewiring exercises and those awareness exercises that we were talking about earlier, and using that in a systematic way that can be repeated time and time again. And it's been a process that I've kind of put together and been experimenting with myself and clients over the last like 4 or 5 years, but now it's a real simple 6-step process. And so I teach that in a cohort that happens a couple times a year, and there's information about that on my website. And then I'm also building out a microdosing integration course for people. So if they are unable to access like one-on-one coaching, this at least gives them an access to what are all the different elements to work with microdosing in a protocol. And that's available to people through a consult, because we want to make sure that that's the right fit for people. There are certain situations where it's not a good fit. So that's available through booking a free call with me. So yeah.
Wonderful.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. And we're going to stack our show notes with all of the resources, so you can find you every which way.
Cool. It was such a pleasure getting to talk to 2 other biohacking babes, which it's right at my alley. So I'm super grateful that I was able to come on.
Oh, we're so happy to spend this time with you. So we're going to finish with a final question. Can you share one piece of advice that people can start doing today to optimize health, wellness, narrative, mindset, anything that comes to mind?
Oh gosh, I sound like a broken record, but I'm telling you guys, sunrise. Just build a sunrise practice. Like if anything, go get the really pretty pictures, right? Sunrise, if there's clouds in the sky, you get these mind-blowing pictures. So just use it as an excuse to get yourself out. But I haven't found a practice that trumps it in terms of the number of check boxes that fills off, because you're getting fresh air, you're getting a little movement by going outside, you're getting the sunlight, like so many different things in that 1 20-minute period. So, and it's free, and all you have to do is go outside your door, right? Don't have to go on a
Yeah.
crazy hike, right? But
Yeah.
all you have to do is go outside your door, or open the window if that's all you can do. Like open up the window so that you don't have glass. Like that is by far, I have had clients come off of major monster drink habits just through sunrise.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's that impactful.
Powerful.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All
Love
right.
that.
Cool.
Powerful.
Heard it here.
Greatest bang for your buck. Free.
Yeah. It's huge.
Accessible.
Yeah.
Love
That's
it.
our language. I love it. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
broken record. We need it.
Yeah.
We need it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're
This
welcome.
is so fun,
Yeah.
Torea. Thank you so much for being a part of our conversation today.
My
And-
pleasure.
Yeah. I learned so much from you today. Really, I really
Ah,
enjoyed this.
Yay.
Thank you.
That's awesome. It's
And
always good to
lots
hear.
of food for thought for later today.
That's right.
Got my brain spinning.
Good.
Yes.
Good.
So thank you. And thank you to everyone that tuned in today. We'll see you next time.